Fasting Friday, and our next guest is author and senior rabbi of IKAR, a Jewish congregation based in Los Angeles. And this Passover, she's working to shed light on the power of community during dark times.
That is so important, and she talks about it in her book, The Amen Effect. And here to share her message of hope is Rabbi Sharon Brous. Good to see you, my friend, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So this book stems from pastoring a community in LA. Why was it important to get it out now?
Yeah, well, we built this community in LA about 20 years ago, and what I've seen over the years is the impact that loneliness and social alienation and isolation have on our spirits. It's actually breaking us. We feel so disconnected from one another, and it's hurting our spirits. And then I started to read some of the research that's come out in the last decade and a half or so, and we see that it's not only hurting our spirits, but it's actually hurting our bodies. We know now that acute loneliness has the same impact on our lungs and heart as essentially smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's pretty profound. And all of that is compounded by the fact that we now know that social alienation and disconnection and isolation is actually breaking our society. It threatens to break our democracy. And so it felt to me really critical to put out a message of how precisely in a moment when our inclination is to turn away from each other, we have to turn toward one another. And the whole book is rooted in this one particular ancient ritual when Jews used to come up from all around the land and even the diaspora up to Jerusalem for pilgrimage. And they would go up and ascend to Jerusalem, the city on a hill, climb the steps of the Temple Mount and enter through this beautiful arched entryway and turn to the right. And hundreds of thousands of people would circle around the courtyard and then leave where they came in, except for someone who's brokenhearted. And that person would go through the same entryway but turn to the left. And a sacred encounter would happen between the people who were okay, there for their spiritual work, and the person who's brokenhearted. And they would turn to the brokenhearted and ask with open-hearted wonder and curiosity and care, tell me about your heart. Tell me what's broken. And the person would articulate their pain, and then they would receive a blessing. And it felt to me like such a powerful model of what's missing in our society, because we turn away from each other at exactly the time that we actually need to open our hearts to one another and actually find the courage to be vulnerable with each other. So this book is really a plea to turn to each other with love, with care, with curiosity, in solidarity, in celebration, and even in sorrow, as a way of helping heal ourselves and our society.
You know, there's so much brokenness in this world right now, and so much unrest. I mean, there's been protests on college campuses all across the country this past week. As a spiritual leader, what do you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, I went up to visit campus yesterday, and I've been tracking this obviously very closely. And I have a kid in college, and really in a hot spot in the country. And you know, what I could sense in the protests was that the students who were there were getting this sense of belonging and purpose from being there, which is really important because we all need that. But the way that these protests are unfolding, we're seeing a kind of virulent anti-Semitism that is manifesting in a lot of the protest spaces, which is extremely dangerous. And we're seeing a false binary that's being set up that calls not for peace, not for some kind of policy change, but for the annihilation of the state of Israel. Ultimately, there are millions of people, Palestinians and Israelis, who live in that land, and they on the ground are working to build a just future together. And what I want to see here is that here we in the diaspora are able to support the work of those outstanding organizations and individuals who are on the ground there, who are really dreaming about just and shared future. So can we use our moral imagination? Imagine if these protests were actually about collective liberation. Imagine if they were actually about dreaming a better future for Jews and Palestinians in the land. That would take on a very different tone than what we're seeing right now, and I think it is possible. So my hope is that these students can find the same sense of purpose and belonging, but in a movement that's actually about collective liberation, not about the annihilation of one party or the other. There's so much sorrow and pain here. The hostages need to come home. The people of Gaza desperately need humanitarian aid, and that all the people in the land need to be led by leaders who have a moral vision. And we can model that through our own moral imagination here in the States.
And before you go, if you could give us some words of wisdom. I know earlier you talked about loneliness, and I love this chapter here, Come Alive, chapter 4, Be sure to live. How can we do that?
Yeah, so this chapter is actually named after Howard Thurman, the great theologian. And I think what we so often question, like, what am I here for? What is my purpose in life? And my argument is that our purpose is discovered in serving others, in showing up for one another with great compassion and with great care, sometimes even when our own hearts are broken. And so my plea to us is really, can we hold curiosity? Can we look to one another with a sense of wonder, with a sense of compassion, and with the knowledge that we're all broken and we all need healing. We all need to be held with some love.
Yeah, that love is something we definitely all need.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Rabbi Sharon Brous, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And The Amen Effect is available anywhere books are sold. And happy Passover to everyone who celebrates.